For 5 years, Lyanna Ashford was known as the easiest woman in the palace. Not the most beautiful, not the most powerful, not the most influential, the easiest. Servants loved her, guards respected her, foreign guests remembered her long after leaving the kingdom. Whenever problems appeared, Lyanna somehow made them disappear, quietly, efficiently, without asking for credit. If 2 servants argued, she settled the dispute. If a visiting ambassador felt unwelcome, she fixed the situation before it became an incident. If a grieving family lost someone during a military campaign, she visited personally. The palace functioned more smoothly because Lyanna existed. The strange part was that very few people noticed, including the one person who should have noticed most, Alpha King Kaelor Vyre. To be fair, Kaelor wasn't cruel. He wasn't neglectful on purpose. He ruled one of the largest kingdoms on the continent. His days overflowed with military reports, diplomatic negotiations, trade agreements, and council meetings. Every morning began before sunrise. Every night ended long after dark. Responsibility followed him everywhere. Over time, he simply became accustomed to Lyanna's presence, like sunlight through a window or a familiar hallway. Something always there, something reliable, something permanent. And permanence has a dangerous way of becoming invisible. At first, Lyanna didn't mind. She understood duty, she understood sacrifice. For years, she convinced herself that being needed was enough, that appreciation wasn't necessary, that eventually things would slow down. Eventually, there would be time. Eventually, Kaelor would notice. Unfortunately, eventually is a promise people make when they don't want to change today. One evening, Lyanna stood near the palace entrance, welcoming a diplomatic delegation from the Eastern Territories. The guests appeared exhausted after weeks of travel. Before the servants could react, Lyanna arranged accommodations, organized a private dinner, and ensured every request was handled personally. The delegation left impressed. The palace staff praised her quietly. By morning, everyone had moved on. The success became another invisible contribution, another task completed, another responsibility absorbed into the background. That was how it always happened. The kingdom benefited, the palace benefited, Kaelor benefited, and Lyanna remained unseen, not ignored, just assumed, as though her kindness existed naturally, as though her support required no effort, as though she would always be there. That assumption followed her everywhere, through royal banquets, through council functions, through long evenings spent waiting for conversations that never happened. Yet somehow, the loneliness wasn't what finally changed things. It was a single conversation, one she wasn't supposed to hear, a conversation taking place beyond the council chamber doors, a conversation that would force Lyanna to see her entire life differently. And once she heard it, nothing would ever be the same again. The council meeting lasted longer than expected. By late afternoon, frustration filled the chamber. Trade negotiations had stalled. Several border disputes required attention. The ministers argued over budgets. The generals argued over strategy. Nothing unusual. For Kaelor, it was simply another day ruling a kingdom. For Lyanna, it began the same way. She spent the morning organizing correspondence, coordinating schedules, and preparing documents for the royal council, tasks she handled so regularly that no one needed to ask anymore. She simply knew what needed to be done. By evening, she carried a stack of reports toward the council chamber. The meeting was still underway. Voices drifted through the partially open doors. Lyanna slowed her steps. Not intentionally, she simply recognized Kaelor's voice. The discussion sounded lighter than before. The serious business had apparently concluded. Now the nobles were talking casually, laughing, relaxing. Leanna waited near the entrance for a servant to announce her arrival. Then she heard her own name. Immediately, she paused. Inside the chamber, one of the older nobles chuckled. "Your Majesty, when are you finally giving Lady Leanna an official title?" Several council members laughed. The question wasn't new. People had asked variations of it for years. Everyone knew Leanna practically functioned as part of the royal household. Many assumed a formal position would eventually follow. Another noble joined in. "The entire kingdom already treats her like a queen." More laughter. Good-natured. Friendly. Leanna almost smiled. Then Kaelor answered. Not cruelly, not dismissively, casually, as if stating something obvious. "Leanna doesn't care about those things." The room hummed with agreement. Several nobles nodded. One smirked. "Still, she's devoted to you." Kaelor signed a document without looking up. "Exactly." The conversation immediately moved on. A new topic replaced the old one. The nobles continued laughing. The meeting continued. Inside the chamber, no one gave the exchange another thought. Outside the chamber, Leanna stood perfectly still, because one word refused to leave her mind. Exactly. Not because it was insulting. It wasn't. Not directly. The problem was what it revealed. Kaelor wasn't praising her. He wasn't appreciating her. He was assuming her. Her loyalty, her patience, her support, all of it had become expected, guaranteed, permanent. The realization settled over her slowly, painfully. For years, she believed her devotion meant something, that the sacrifices mattered, that eventually they would be acknowledged. Now she understood something different. People rarely appreciate what they believe cannot leave. Leanna looked down at the reports in her hands. Suddenly, they felt heavier. Not because of paper, because of clarity. The truth had always existed. She simply hadn't wanted to see it. The servant finally approached. "My lady." Leanna blinked. The sound pulled her back to reality. Without another glance toward the chamber, she handed over the documents. "Please, deliver these for me." The servant frowned. "Aren't you coming inside?" Leanna smiled softly. No. For the first time in years, she realized she didn't want to hear another word. That night, after the palace fell asleep, Leanna sat alone in her chambers. The silence felt different now, clearer, and somewhere between midnight and dawn. She made a decision. The decision did not feel dramatic. That surprised Leanna. She had always imagined life-changing moments would arrive with tears, anger, heartbreak, some overwhelming emotion impossible to ignore. Instead, she felt calm, not happy, not sad, certain. The conversation outside the council chamber had not broken her heart. It had simply revealed the truth. And once truth becomes visible, pretending otherwise grows exhausting. The palace settled into silence around midnight. Servants retired to their quarters. Guards rotated positions. The last candles dimmed along the corridors. Everything appeared normal, which made what Leanna was about to do seem almost unreal. She opened her wardrobe and removed a small travel bag. Not a large one. There wasn't much she wanted to take. A few practical dresses, personal documents, several books she loved. Nothing more. As she packed, her eyes drifted across the room. Every object carried a memory, a gift from a visiting ambassador, a decorative box from a neighboring kingdom, jewelry presented during royal celebrations. Most had been given because of her connection to Kaelor. None felt like hers. One by one, she left them behind. The process took less than an hour. 5 years reduced to a single travel bag. The realization should have hurt. Instead, it felt strangely freeing. Eventually, her attention settled on a silver bracelet resting against her wrist. Kaylor had given it to her years earlier, during a rare afternoon when both of them escaped palace responsibilities long enough to walk through the royal gardens. At the time, the gift meant everything, not because it was expensive, because it felt personal, thoughtful, a reminder that she mattered. Slowly, Leanna unclasped it. The familiar weight disappeared immediately. For several seconds, she simply stared at the bracelet in her hand. Then, she carried it to her desk, placed it carefully beside a sheet of paper, and picked up a pen. The note took only moments to write. Not because she lacked things to say, because explanations no longer interested her. If Kaylor truly understood her, a paragraph wouldn't be necessary. And if he didn't, 100 pages wouldn't help. So she wrote a single sentence. For the first time, I'm choosing myself. Nothing else. No accusations. No blame. No farewell. The simplicity felt appropriate. After folding the note, she placed it beneath the bracelet, then looked around the room one final time. 5 years, countless memories, hundreds of sacrifices, thousands of quiet moments nobody noticed. All of it remained behind. A strange peace settled over her. Not because leaving was easy, because staying had finally become harder. Just before midnight, Leanna slipped through a quiet service entrance at the rear of the palace. No guards stopped her. No servants questioned her. Everyone knew her, trusted her, assumed she belonged, which made leaving surprisingly simple. The night air felt cool against her skin. For a moment, she looked back at the palace, the place she had spent years calling home. Then she turned away and kept walking. By the time the kingdom slept, Leanna Ashford was already gone, and by sunrise, an entire palace would discover how much of its foundation had quietly disappeared with her. The first problem appeared shortly after sunrise. A diplomatic delegation from the Western Territories arrived at the wrong estate. No one understood why. The itinerary had been finalized weeks earlier, yet somehow, the instructions delivered to the delegation were outdated. The servants scrambled to correct the mistake. Everyone blamed a clerical error. Then, a second problem surfaced. A trade meeting involving 3 major merchants vanished from the royal schedule entirely. The merchants arrived. The officials did not. Confusion spread through the palace corridors. Before anyone could solve that issue, a military courier delivered the wrong documents to the Defense Council. Critical reports were missing. Important updates had never been forwarded. By mid-morning, chaos had taken hold. Servants rushed through the halls, carrying revised schedules. Council aides argued over missing correspondence. Department heads exchanged accusations. Everyone insisted someone else made the mistake. No one could explain why so many unrelated problems were happening at once. The palace had experienced busy days before, difficult days, even disastrous days. Nothing like this, because these weren't major crises. They were dozens of tiny failures occurring simultaneously, the sort of failures that normally never happened, at least not when Leanna was there. Unfortunately, no one had reached that realization yet, not even Kaylor. The Alpha King sat in the council chamber, reviewing military reports, when a nervous servant approached the throne. The young woman looked pale, terrified, as though delivering bad news to a ruler was the last thing she wanted to do. "My king." Kaylor barely looked up. "What is it?" The servant hesitated, then swallowed hard. "Lady Leanna is gone." The words finally captured his attention. Kaylor lifted his eyes. What do you mean, gone? No panic entered his voice. Only confusion. People left the palace constantly. Visits, travel, charitable projects. Nothing unusual about that. The servant shifted uncomfortably. We don't know where she went. A strange silence followed. Kaylor frowned. When will she return? The servant's expression somehow grew worse. Then she extended a folded note. She left this. Something cold settled in the room. The king accepted the paper, opened it, read the sentence once, then again. For the first time, I'm choosing myself. The words felt deceptively simple, yet they carried a weight he couldn't immediately explain. Kaylor's eyes moved to the silver bracelet resting beside the note. Recognition hit instantly. The gift he gave her years ago. Returned. Not forgotten. Returned. For the first time, unease replaced confusion. The council chamber had become completely silent. Every advisor watched carefully, waiting. The king stared at the note, then slowly rose from his chair. Too quickly. The force sent the heavy wooden seat crashing backward onto the stone floor. The sound echoed through the chamber. No one moved. No one spoke. Because in 5 years, most people had never seen Kaylor react emotionally to anything. Finally, he looked toward the servant. When did she leave? Last night, my king. The answer landed like a blow. Last night. While he attended meetings, reviewed reports, lived his life exactly as always. Lyanna disappeared, and he never noticed. The realization struck harder than expected. Without another word, Kaylor turned toward the council. Cancel everything. The room stared. One advisor blinked. Your Majesty, I said cancel everything. For the first time in years, the Alpha King abandoned every responsibility, because finding Lyanna suddenly felt more important than all of them. By noon, riders had been dispatched across the kingdom. By evening, every major checkpoint possessed Lyanna's description. By midnight, innkeepers, merchants, village elders, and border guards were answering questions about a woman carrying a single travel bag. The kingdom had never seen Alpha King Kaylor move this quickly. Not for political disputes, not for trade agreements, not even for military matters. The urgency unsettled everyone, especially the royal council. The following morning, several advisors gathered in the council chamber. Their expressions ranged from concerned to outright confused. One elder finally spoke. Your Majesty, with respect. Kaylor didn't look up from the reports covering his desk. What? The elder hesitated. She's only one woman. The room immediately fell silent, because everyone realized the mistake the moment the words left his mouth. Slowly, Kaylor raised his head. His expression remained calm, which somehow felt more intimidating than anger. No. A pause. Then, she's the reason half of you remembered where you were supposed to be yesterday morning. No one answered, because everyone knew he was right. The diplomatic confusion, the missing schedules, the delayed reports, none of those problems had magically appeared. Lyanna had simply stopped preventing them. And now, the kingdom was experiencing the difference. Over the following days, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Everywhere Kaylor turned, reminders waited. A charity event lacked coordination. The lady usually handled that. A visiting diplomat requested accommodations. Lady Lyanna arranged those details. A regional governor sent urgent correspondence. The lady maintained that relationship. Again, and again, and again. The same answer. The same absence. The same realization. Kaylor had spent years assuming the palace functioned smoothly because it was well organized. Now he understood something uncomfortable. The palace functioned smoothly because Lyanna quietly ensured it did. The difference mattered. A week into the search, Kaylor entered the royal dining room. The table had already been prepared. His favorite tea sat waiting beside his plate. The sight stopped him, because Lyanna always remembered. Not the servants, not the kitchen staff. Her. The tea suddenly felt less comforting than usual. For the first time, he left it untouched. 2 weeks after her disappearance, a breakthrough finally arrived. A messenger rode through the palace gates shortly before dawn. Dust covered his clothes. Exhaustion lined his face, yet excitement brightened his eyes. The guard delivered him directly to the king. "My king!" Kaylor stood immediately. "What did you find?" The messenger handed over a report. A mountain province, north of the river valleys. Kaylor opened it instantly. His pulse quickened as he read. Several witnesses described a woman matching Lyanna's appearance, traveling alone, helping local communities, working alongside villagers. The reports grew more specific with every page. By the final paragraph, certainty remained. They found her, not hiding, not fleeing, not lost, exactly where she wanted to be. Kaylor lowered the report slowly. For 2 weeks, he imagined countless possibilities. None looked like this. A small mountain province, recovering from devastating floods. A place few nobles would ever visit. A place Lyanna had apparently chosen. Without hesitation, the king issued a single command. "Prepare my horse." The nearest advisor blinked. "You're going yourself?" Kaylor folded the report. His answer came immediately. "Yes, because after 2 weeks spent following her shadow, he was finally going to find the woman he never realized he was losing." The journey took 3 days. 3 days of mountain roads, steep cliffs, narrow trails winding through valleys, still recovering from last year's floods. The farther Kaylor traveled from the capital, the quieter the world became. No council meetings, no ministers, no endless reports demanding attention. Only time. And unfortunately, time gave him space to think. The realization followed him everywhere. How many times had Lyanna mentioned these villages? How many charitable projects had she organized without asking for recognition? How many conversations had he only half listened to? The questions grew heavier with every mile. By the time he reached the province, he found himself hoping for something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe she would be waiting. Maybe she would be angry. Maybe she would at least make this simple. Reality had other plans. The village sat between 2 mountain ridges, overlooking a wide river valley. Evidence of the flood remained everywhere. Damaged stone walls, partially rebuilt homes, fresh timber stacked beside roads, still under repair. Yet, despite the scars, the settlement felt alive, hopeful, busy, and at the center of it all was Lyanna. Kaylor spotted her before anyone noticed him. She stood near a wooden bridge under construction, a rolled map tucked beneath one arm. Several workers surrounded her, listening carefully as she spoke. The sight stopped him cold. Not because she looked different, because she looked familiar. This was the Lyanna he rarely saw at the palace. Confident, capable, purposeful, not waiting quietly in the background, leading. A group of children ran toward her, carrying baskets of supplies. She laughed and thanked them. Moments later, an elderly woman approached. Lyanna greeted her warmly. Then a builder asked for advice. Then a merchant. Then another villager. Every interaction looked effortless, natural, as though she belonged here, as though the entire village trusted her completely. The realization unsettled Kaylor, because she wasn't simply helping. She mattered. The villagers knew her name. The children adored her. The elders respected her. And watching it all unfold made him understand something painful. At the palace, people appreciated what Lyanna did. Here, they appreciated who she was. The difference was impossible to ignore. For nearly an hour, Kaylor remained where he was, observing, learning, trying to reconcile this vibrant woman with the one he thought he knew. Eventually, one of the villagers noticed him. Recognition spread immediately. Whispers followed. The Alpha King had arrived. The news traveled quickly, too quickly. A few moments later, Leanna turned. Their eyes met across the construction site. Surprise flickered across her face, gone almost instantly. Then came something else, calm acceptance. Not shock, not anger, as though part of her always expected this moment. For several seconds, neither moved. The noise of the village faded into the background. Finally, Leanna offered a small smile. Polite, distant, the kind reserved for someone no longer entitled to familiarity. And somehow, that hurt more than hostility ever could. Because for the first time, Kaylor saw the life she built without him, and the truth became impossible to ignore. She wasn't surviving here. She was thriving. As evening settled across the valley, Kaylor made a decision. There were questions he needed answered, conversations that should have happened years ago. So, when the sun disappeared behind the mountains, he went looking for her. Kaylor found Leanna overlooking the valley just after sunset. The village lights glowed below like scattered stars. Workers had returned home. The construction sites sat quiet. Only the sound of the river echoed through the mountains. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt different here. Not tense, not hostile, just honest. The kind of silence that appears when two people have avoided a conversation for far too long. Eventually, Kaylor stepped closer. "You left." The words sounded foolish the moment he said them. Leanna smiled faintly. "Yes." Nothing more. No explanation. No apology. Just the truth. Kaylor exhaled slowly. The journey suddenly felt much longer than 3 days. "You left without a goodbye." That earned a slightly different smile. Sad, almost amused, Leanna looked out across the valley, then asked quietly, "Did I?" The question caught him off guard. Kaylor frowned. "What does that mean?" For several moments, she simply watched the distant village, as though deciding how honest she wanted to be. When she finally spoke, her voice remained calm, gentle, the same voice he had heard for years. Only now he actually listened. "You never noticed I was leaving before." The words landed immediately, hard, because he understood exactly what she meant. Not one night, not one decision. Years, years of emotional distance, years of becoming less important while standing in the same room. Kaylor opened his mouth, then closed it again. No defense came. No excuse felt sufficient. Leanna continued. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. This time, she laughed, softly, not cruelly, just with the disbelief of someone hearing a question they never expected. "I did." The answer stunned him. "No, you didn't." Leanna turned toward him. For the first time, something heavier entered her expression. Not anger, weariness, the kind created by repeating yourself for too long. Every missed dinner, silence. Kaylor remembered those, promising to join her later, promising tomorrow would be easier, promising next week, always later. Leanna continued. Every canceled walk, another silence. The memories surfaced immediately. The royal gardens, plans postponed, conversations delayed, moments replaced by meetings. Then another report, another responsibility, another excuse. Her gaze never left his. Every time I stopped talking because nobody was listening. The valley suddenly felt very quiet, because that one hurt most. Not because he remembered a specific moment, because he remembered dozens, hundreds, small opportunities ignored, tiny disappointments dismissed. The sort of moments people convince themselves don't matter, until one day they become everything. Kaylor lowered his gaze briefly. The gesture surprised even him. Kings rarely looked guilty, yet guilt was exactly what he felt. Not because Lyanna accused him, because she didn't. She simply described reality, and reality proved difficult to argue against. For several moments, neither spoke. The river echoed below. The wind moved gently through the trees. Finally, Kaylor looked up. Only one question remained. The question that mattered most. The question he feared hearing the answer to. So he took a breath, then asked quietly, "Will you come back?" Lyanna stared at him for a long moment, and the expression in her eyes told him the answer would not be simple. For several seconds after Kaylor asked, neither of them spoke. The valley stretched beneath them. The village lights flickered in the darkness. Somewhere below, a dog barked. A door closed. Life continued, completely unaware that an Alpha King was waiting for an answer that might change everything. Lyanna studied him, quietly, not because she wanted to make him suffer, because she wanted to know whether he finally understood. There was a difference. Eventually, she asked a question of her own. "For what?" Kaylor frowned slightly. "What? For what would I come back?" The words settled between them. Simple, reasonable, devastating, because suddenly the answer didn't seem obvious anymore. At the palace, every problem pointed back to her absence. Schedules, diplomacy, relationships, chaos. But none of those things were reasons. They were consequences. Lyanna waited patiently, giving him the opportunity to answer. The opportunity he should have been prepared for. Kaylor opened his mouth, then stopped, because the first answer that came to mind sounded wrong. "Because I need you." The words never left his lips. Thankfully, because even he recognized the problem. Need wasn't enough. Need was exactly what had brought them here. For years, he needed her support, needed her reliability, needed her loyalty, and somewhere along the way, he stopped appreciating the person providing those things. Lyanna saw the realization happen in real time. She didn't interrupt, didn't rescue him from it. Some lessons had to be experienced fully. Finally, Kaylor spoke, more slowly this time, more honestly. "I don't know." The admission surprised both of them. Kings weren't supposed to say those words. Kings were expected to have answers, solutions, certainty. Yet uncertainty was all he had, because for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he wanted. He was thinking about what she deserved. The distinction mattered a great deal. Lyanna nodded, as though the answer confirmed something. "I know." No anger, no disappointment, just understanding. Kaylor looked toward the village below, the homes, the rebuilt bridges, the life she had created here. Then, back at her. What would need to change? The question emerged quietly, almost reluctantly, because part of him feared the answer. Lyanna considered it carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice remained calm. "I need to matter when I'm present." The words hit harder than expected, because they sounded so simple, yet he had failed to provide them for years. She continued, "Not when I'm gone." The truth landed immediately, painfully, because the entire kingdom suddenly appreciated Lyanna. The council appreciated her. The palace appreciated her. Even Kaylor appreciated her. But only after she left, only after absence made her visible. For several moments, neither spoke. The lesson lingered between them, heavy, undeniable. Finally, Lyanna smiled softly, not because everything was fixed, because honesty had finally arrived. And honesty was at least a beginning. The problem was that beginnings and endings rarely happen at the same time. As the wind moved across the valley, Kalor realized something difficult. He could not simply ask for forgiveness. He could not simply ask her to return. If he wanted another chance, he would have to earn it. And for the first time in a very long while, the Alpha King was willing to try. The next morning, Kalor remained in the mountain province, not because Lyanna asked him to, because leaving felt wrong. For 5 years, she had adjusted her life around his schedule, his responsibilities, his priorities. For once, he could do the same. The realization was humbling. Throughout the day, he watched her work, not from a distance this time. Beside her, he helped carry supplies, met village leaders, listened to concerns about rebuilding efforts. The experience taught him something unexpected. Lyanna wasn't extraordinary because she solved problems. Many people solved problems. She was extraordinary because people felt seen around her. Children approached without fear. Elders trusted her opinions. Families welcomed her into their homes. She remembered names, stories, details others forgot. The same qualities she brought to the palace. The same qualities everyone overlooked until they disappeared. That evening, Kalor prepared to leave. The kingdom still required a ruler. Responsibilities still waited. Some things could not be postponed forever. Before departing, he found Lyanna near the river. The water moved steadily through the valley, calm, certain, much like her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Kalor broke the silence. "I'm not asking you to come back." Lyanna looked surprised, only slightly. The king smiled faintly. "Not yet." The answer made her laugh softly. A genuine laugh, the first he had heard in a long time. Kalor continued. "I finally understand something." She raised an eyebrow. "What?" "I spent years appreciating what you did." A pause. "Without appreciating you." The honesty lingered between them, because it was true, painfully true. Lyanna looked toward the river, then back at him. For the first time since he arrived, something in her expression softened. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, possibility. And for now, that was enough. Kalor returned to the capital alone. The palace still felt different, quieter. The absence remained. But so did the lesson. This time, he didn't allow people to dismiss it. Council members learned how much Lyanna contributed. Servants received more recognition. Relationships received more attention. Gradually, the culture of the palace began changing. Not because Lyanna demanded it, because her departure exposed everything that needed to improve. Meanwhile, she remained in the mountain province, building, helping, thriving. The life she created continued growing, and every few weeks, the Alpha King visited. Not as a ruler, checking on a project. As a man learning how to show up consistently. The kingdom expected Lyanna to return quickly. She didn't. Some lessons require time. Some trust requires rebuilding. And some people need distance before deciding whether a second chance deserves consideration. Years later, people remembered the story differently than expected. Not as the tale of a king searching for a woman, but as the story of a woman who quietly disappeared and forced an entire kingdom to confront an uncomfortable truth. People rarely leave because of one argument, one disappointment, one mistake. They leave after countless opportunities to be seen go unnoticed. And sometimes the loudest goodbye is never spoken at all. It's the empty chair, the quiet room, the missing presence everyone assumed would always remain. Lyanna walked away first, not because she stopped caring, because she finally cared about herself too. And in doing so, she taught an Alpha King and an entire kingdom that appreciation means very little after someone is gone. The people who matter most should be valued while they're still standing beside you.